Okay. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Well done. We've made it to here, and hopefully people will find their way to us. And it's all good because this will be recorded and shared on the SEMA, on the Scottish Ethnic Minority Autistics um, YouTube channel. So people can benefit from this conversation, hopefully, in their own times, even if they don't necessarily make it to the live. Because as always, what's a live conversation without some technical hiccups?
Oh,
So but bless you, Sophia, you did so well. You got us right onto the connecting the Zoom and the YouTube, and the links are there, and it's telling us we're live, but the gremlins are in there somewhere and we can't do it. But it's fine. We find alternatives. We don't get knocked down so easily.
no.
So let's just give a brief introduction to ourselves. So Sophia, you go ahead and introduce yourself first.
Okay, so yeah, I'm Sofia Farzana. I am based in Scotland, middle of Scotland. I am a mum of three, and really am bad at introductions. But I'm the director and co-founder of Scottish Ethnic Minority Autistics, which I founded a couple of years ago on the back of my own autism diagnosis and journey of self-discovery.
Mm,
And then I found out there's a lot of people like me, and the support out there for people who are like me is basically non-existent. And so
mm.
that's why I thought, well, if there's nothing there to help us, let's create it. And that's how we set up.
Amazing, wonderful. So I'm Sofia Rehman. Hopefully, this won't get confusing. And I am an academic at the University of Leeds. I'm a visiting research fellow there. It's where I also did my PhD. So my background is in Islamic theology. Previously, my interests were primarily on the intersection of Islam and women, and looking at women's voices at the center of the Islamic tradition. But generally speaking, my interest has always been on, who sits at the margins of our community. And I'm not always necessarily interested in bringing them into the center, but more like, how do we create a new center where they are? Because actually, quite often, there's just so much for us to benefit from in shifting the center. Because we never think about, well, who made this the center and is this even working, right?
Yeah.
So now my research interest is looking at um, autistic Muslim experiences, but not as a subject for me to research, but actually as a site of knowledge production. I think that there are ways in which neurotypicals can learn, and even our understanding of Islam, the Quran, of Allah themselves can be really enriched by by autistic perspectives. I almost said the autistic perspective, and obviously there is not one, there are multiple. Um, and through my sort of foray into this work, I've been working with Dr. Leon van Ommen from the Center for Autism and Theology at the University of Aberdeen. And he put me in touch with Sophia. And it was just, I had that one conversation with you, didn't I? And I was like, we need to do a live. We need to talk about this. We need to bring more Muslims into conversation on this very subject. So I'm really glad that we've made this time to be able to do so. So I guess let's just dive straight into it, Sophia. I mean, the first thing I really wanted to ask you about is, we call this event Autistic Ramadan. So what do we mean when we talk about an autistic Ramadan, and why is it even important for those who might be confused as to why we're talking about an autistic Ramadan?
It's all about the internal experience. It's all about the inside out viewing it of how we see the world. So autistic as in that is literally my operating system and how I experience everything around me. So that includes then the month of Ramadan as well, with the whole routines and everything that goes around it. So that's how it was to emphasize that it's coming from on the inside, and
Mm,
it's not something separate from me. You can't change who you are, what you're like, just because like one month has come along, or an event, a life event has come along. It comes in. It's being autistic as every part of my life, as a mother, as a teacher, as an advocate, as a sister. I am an autistic XYZ mother, teacher, advocate. So that is like primarily how I am, basically. So I cannot remove that away from being a Muslim. I'm an autistic Muslim so then my experiences of Ramadan are very much influenced by my own internal experiences of my body. So it's not just an autistic brain, but obviously an autistic body that comes along with it and the impact of that.
Mhm. And in the preparation for this conversation, and we will come to this topic later, but it's just to demonstrate something in terms of this question. You'd told me that there'd been a question about wudu and making wudu, the ablution before prayer, and how that can be an uncomfortable and even painful experience for some autistic Muslims. And I mean, I live in a household which is very, neurodiverse, right? And I sat there after you'd shared this, and I asked my family members, I was like, how do you all find making wudu? And
Mm.
all of them were like, it's horrendous. And I never knew that. I never realized the difficulty that they had, the sensory difficulty that they have with wudu. And I thought, my goodness, I have such a open and communicative relationship with you all, and I didn't know this. We live under the same roof, and I don't know this. And I felt really upset actually, because I thought there must be a myriad of ways in which they navigate this very hegemonic, neurotypical way of doing Islam. And so, and they didn't even ever think to ask the question, because it's like, well, if I do it any other way, is my salah acceptable? Is my prayer valid? Am I doing the right thing? Am I a lesser Muslim somehow if I'm not doing it in a neurotypical way? And of
Mhm.
course, we know that Allah tells us, right? لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها, that Allah doesn't bear upon a soul a burden more than it can bear. And yet here we are, neurotypicals, or anyone else that sort of sits at that center of Islam that we were talking about, not looking at the margins and asking, well, what is the need there? And excuse me, one of the things that I've found in my, coming to this research is the work of John Swinton and how he talks about, I remember you and I discussed this about how it's not enough to talk about being inclusive. Yeah.
Mm.
When you talk in language of inclusivity, you're still saying this is the majority and the norm and the normative and the hegemonic. And those are all of you who sit on the outside of that and who we are going to make space for and tolerate.
Mhm.
But that's not full humanizing of an individual, right? And so he says we need to move away from inclusivity and work towards belonging so that, when that autistic Muslim isn't there, or when that elderly person who needs a chair to sit on, or when that physically disabled person who needs a ramp or an escalator or some sort of help to 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 get to the masjid space or wherever they're trying to get to, that we miss them, that we say, hey, where are you? Rather than be like, okay, we've made these great performances of inclusivity now, or thank goodness they're not here, so we don't have to do that. So really, it's so important for us to be thinking about actually the experience of an autistic Muslim of Ramadan is so different from that, often very different to that of a neurotypical Muslim. Um, I mean, just by way of example, that perhaps people who are not neurodiverse may be able to resonate with. If I think about myself as a woman who, over the years I've been a new wife or a mother or a new mother, or um, my experience of Ramadan is so different to my husband's. It's so different to my husband's. He can wick off to the masjid if he wants to, or, like he never has to worry about going to a masjid and finding the doors are locked for him. Like one Ramadan, we went to our usual masjid for Taraweeh and we got told, sorry, this year there's no space for women. No, no.
Yeah.
prior announcement. We just got told when we got. So a woman's experience of Ramadan is so different to a man's experience of Ramadan.
Yes.
And then there's the expectation of cooking and all the rest of that.
Yes.
And then to then throw into the mix, then, autism and an autistic person's experience of Ramadan is going to be different to a neurotypical person's experience of Ramadan, but we never talk about it. I've never seen it being talked about.
No, a couple of years ago, I think I got fed up of it not being talked about. And that's why a couple of years ago on my Instagram page, I just thought, right, that's it. And I was very ill thought out because I was already actually in Ramadan. I wasn't pre-prep because I don't think about things beforehand. I just like on the spot. So every day, I think I only managed to do 9 or 10 posts, but I was like, no, I was quite inspired because I was on my unmasking stage where I had just got my diagnosis, and I really wanted people to understand where I'm coming from. So obviously, it was my hyperfocus. I mean, what autistic person doesn't have autism as a hyperfocus, right? So I'm no different. And I wanted people to understand actually, no one's talking about this. Can we talk about the timing, the transitions, the sensory, the executive dysfunction, the family, community, the gift
Mm,
giving, even that, the organization aspect? Can we talk
mm.
about all those parts of Ramadan as an autistic person? So we actually, myself and my co-director, colleague Laura built, and we actually did a webinar for our local, and I say local because you're in England, I'm in Scotland, right? So over the other side of Glasgow area, we did a webinar for carers of mostly their South Asian, but not necessarily South Asians, and it was looking at autistic sensory needs through Ramadan, and we used Ramadan as a context, and we talked about sensory, only sensory, and it was a huge 1.5 hour webinar in great detail, talking about how we experience like life, like I said, why we're here, right? And that was like the first time it was talked about. And I was like, why?
Mm,
Our sensei and we can learn from the event of Ramadan and transpose that to other cultural events or other religious points in the calendar for other religions and faiths as well. It's not exclusive. Just for us as Muslims. So I hope that people
mm,
who are listening, not necessarily being Muslim, can think about other, events and times in the calendar where we have transitions and where as autistic people,
yeah.
our routines and things that, are disturbed and how we can be accommodated.
Mm, yeah.
So,
So I wanted to pick something up there. So you mentioned your own hyperfixation, and one of the things I know you and I talked about is, you know, being careful not to frame this as a conversation that's so tragic, like because I mean I have an autistic daughter, I have an ADHD daughter, I have an ADHD husband, like we're very, like I said, we have it around, I have it around me all the time, and I don't see it as tragic, and it's not like that at all. And it's, there's so much that is helpful. And one of the things that I always notice with my daughters, and we were talking about this the other
like I
day as well, that like
said,
the hyperfixation means that
we have it
going the whole day without eating is not too difficult,
Sorry.
because they'll just hyperfixate on something. And,
Yeah.
even on a normal day, sometimes they can find themselves so hyperfixated that, they have to be reminded to go and do other things. So, there may be aspects of, um, the way that autism manifests in an individual that actually is really helpful to Ramadan as well.
Mhm.
And so I don't want this conversation to come off as, oh, isn't it difficult? And isn't it so sad? And it's not. So in what ways might Ramadan look different for a neurotypical Muslim, for a autistic Muslim, as compared to a neurotypical one?
So it's quite funny because we always say in our house, like as my non-autistic child would say, my one non-autistic child will say, like I've got unfair advantage because we don't really feel hunger or we forget about hunger. So
Yeah.
like, Ramadan for us is just a breeze, man. It's just like a normal day because like we'll go like 12 hours without eating. It's very commonly said within our autistic community. And it's because of our hyperfixations, or it could be because of interoception. We don't always feel hunger or thirst
Mm,
until it's like proper spread, like dying of hunger. That's the only point we realize that, that how we feel hunger is very different, or thirst is very, very different.
mm,
Um, so then it's like at least we've got some schedule. At least we've got, when it's sunset, we know we've got to eat. Because on a normal day, we'll just go by and there's like not particular schedules,
mm,
and we'll just go like last week I can remember. So I went somewhere and I got offered water. And I'm like, I haven't had water since yesterday, and it's like
Oh,
been about good 12, 13 hours since didn't have a glass of water. And the fact that someone offered me water, I was like, oh, I was supposed to drink water. No wonder I'm feeling X, Y, feeling like a headache or feeling, all this, that, and that. And then I'm really like paying attention to my body.
yeah.
We don't really pay attention to our bodies very much. So that's one thing. So yeah, when it comes to not eating and drinking during the day, that's fine because then we'll have other things that you get on with, and not necessarily feel it. So
Mm,
that's an unfair advantage that my daughter always says to us. And I have to say, over the years, I've realized that I have an intolerance to hunger because I feel it really, really strongly whenever, if I was to feel it, it's always strong. It's never the light hunger.
mm,
And then I get hungry, or they can see a change in my behavior. But when it comes to Ramadan, it's just something special about it. I do not get hungry. It's some
mm,
miracle. It really is some miracle. Like I'll fast during the year, right? And I will feel it, and it will get to me. But Ramadan's blessings are just like so I don't know, magical, just so out of this world, right? It's just something different that it will not affect my mood at all.
mm.
Being hungry and just feeling it or so. It's just a different type of hunger. I don't, it's just a blessing. It's like so true, the blessings of Ramadan. The other way we'd feel it is the biggest thing I think I would say is like it's fine. I don't need to eat and drink. I can live without eating and drinking. It's the sleep personally that kills me, right? It is
Yeah.
the sleep and that's quite funny because there's a funny thing in my family, like with my nephews as well. Carla sleeps at like 2 a.m., 3 a.m. Is that your bedtime? Right? And my kids describe me like a computer on standby, where you press a space bar and it goes on, the slightest touch and then the computer goes on. That's me in my brain, right? I only am ever on standby. I never switch off. So 24 hours a day. So
Oh.
when you're constantly on standby but then you're constantly then disturbed then because you're not on standby
Mm,
for a longer time, you're in between it, you're disturbed there, then that you don't get that rest and that
mm.
disturbed sleep
Yeah.
then does affect us as well. And what I've noticed is that majority of us will have sleep problems. So it's very commonly documented that autistic people have your brains produce less melatonin.
Mm,
So falling asleep, staying asleep is always an issue throughout the year. When it comes to Ramadan, everything's just nocturnal anyway. So in
mm.
one sense, it's good because it's like, yeah, my people, like all the autistic people around the world would be awake anyway, and then you got the Muslims. And right. And I've always found that, the nightlife of Ramadan is just amazing because it's like if I'm
Oh,
up
that's
2 a.m., I'll be
interesting.
texting my bestie, right, who's not autistic, but we'll be messaging each other and I've got company at night time because I'm awake anyway, right? So I've enjoyed the social life of Ramadan, like the nighttime social life, because most of us are just nocturnal anyway. So
Ah,
that's a good one. So one of my first posts when I first did an Autistic Ramadan series was it's when neurotypicals can join autistics because because we're all at night time, right? We're up and it's just so lively.
mm,
Especially our Eastern countries, it's much more lively than it is over here in the West, right?
yeah, yeah.
In and at the mosque is so and the nighttime Tarawih prayer is just so fun, especially for the kids because it's like nighttime and everything's dead, and that's when we come out.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a safe and quiet nighttime is like a safe and quiet place for us, and so
I
we
love
get
that.
more of that.
Yeah. That's amazing. Right. So I'm going to probe you a little bit on that. Um, so it's nighttime and it's a quiet time, but we've all been in the masjid at Taraweeh and it's quite, I mean, especially if Taraweeh is on a weekend or on a school holiday, there's a lot of people in there and there's a lot of sounds and noises and sometimes there's a little there can be intolerance as well. If you need to stim, you need to fidget, especially during the salah. So talk us a little bit, because you mentioned about sensory experiences. There's quite a lot, and like the whole, as we said, iftar and tarawih and charity events and all of these things. Can you I'm hoping that we have in our audience, people who are organizers or volunteers at their local masjid or committee members, during Ramadan and, as they're organizing for their community, how can they think about their spaces and making them, more welcoming of autistic Muslims?
Okay, there's some very basic things that don't cost anything. In fact, will save money as well. Dim down the lighting, please.
Mm.
11, 10 o'clock at night. You don't need like all the tube lights on, right?
Or the
You don't,
chandeliers.
all the yeah, we really don't need every single one on, right? I'm sure we can manage, slightly lower light, and people who are going to fall asleep will fall asleep, right? It doesn't matter how bright it is
Yeah.
because they're sleep deprived. So it's that really, really affects it. It's that sensory overload that does affect it, because if you've got lack of food, or your routines, altered, and then your sleep is disrupted, your
Mm.
ability to withstand extra overload of sensory like input is actually reduced. So my tolerance
Mm.
level, my window of tolerance has actually gone really, really down anyway, given all that. So you come to the mosque, there's quite a lot of things there actually. So you've got your sound, your light, sorry, your light. Turn it down. You don't need to have it extra bright if you UV lights or so, right?
Mm.
We can make that slightly hospitable. And that's not just for autistic people though. That could be for people who might suffer migraines as well.
Yes.
As so, or people who might have anxiety, like other light sensitivities. So it's not just for us. And we always say anything that's good for an autistic person is literally genuinely good for everybody. There's not somebody who's going to be like disadvantaged from
Yeah.
accommodating autistic people. The other
Yeah.
one would be sound. Now, people don't understand that. Well, I know, particularly in our community, when autistic people react to sound, they think that, oh, we're afraid of sound, or we're acting up, or we're just hyping it, right? But
Mm.
the sound, the way I can say it, at the worst possible time, it's literally trauma. When sound
Mm.
is too loud, it's how do I explain it? Like that one time when I did have a huge meltdown outside the mosque, but it was leading up to that, and it was things that happened in the mosque that caused it outside the mosque. And
Mm.
it felt like there were thorns in my brain. Like
Oh.
someone had literally pierced my ears with a needle. And it was so terrifyingly painful that even remembering that pain was making me really upset. And
Mm.
it the impact of that, whether it was the sound, and it was a light, it was too many people around, it was people's noisy, too many people talking at the same time. And again, we're at the mosque and it's evening time. We should respect the ethos of the mosque as well, and not talk extremely loudly and over each other.
Mm.
And it's not you socialize is all right in between and afterwards and all that, but it's evening time, right? So everyone's tired, everybody, not just the autistic people. It's just that the autistic people, the impact is more detrimental. And,
Mm.
and from that, there's the loss of speech that can come on, which certainly does happen to me, is that I lose the ability to speak. So a lot of people, when I tell them I'm autistic, the first thing I get told is, but you talk fine. How can you be autistic? That's what I've been told many times, right?
Yeah.
If I'm in an overstimulated space, I will not be able to speak. That's it. I might be able to say a couple of words or so. Um, Otherwise, what happens is the speech goes down nearly to zero, and the brain just goes up to 1 million miles per hour. And
Mm.
that experience is really terrifying. And then there's the stages of meltdown that you have as well that this causes. Like you've got, and then I'm a grown adult, right? So we're used to seeing little kids having meltdowns in the supermarket or so, right? And we think, okay, that's a little child. When you see a grown woman,
Mm.
right? Looking like this, having a huge meltdown, right? You'd be like, what's going on here? And then with our community, let's look at the context of our community, right? Oh no, it's black magic. Oh no, there's something going on over the heart, right?
Yeah.
If you hear that, right? And it's like, no, it's because the speakers needed to be turned down a wee bit. It's the fact that, I just need a wee quiet dark corner on the side to do my therapy, my prayers. Um, Things like people not going in straight lines. It's our sense of being right or justice, right? When we've been told, straighten your lines, and people
Mm.
don't have straight lines in the women's section. I don't know about the men's section, right? Or when they have gaps, and we've been told not to have gaps, and people are not following the rules. That adds
Mm.
to the stress. That
Mm.
adds to the intolerance to the light and the sound. And then, I actually rock up with my orange glasses that I have. I was going to bring them, they're upstairs though. I have orange glasses tinted specs that I use now the past couple of years. and that kind of signifies the fact very visually that yeah, I have disability and I am different and I need some accommodation. Not everyone has these orange glasses. Not everyone has the confidence to say that I need the light to be dimmer or I need the speakers not to be excessively loud.
Mm.
What's the point of having it ridiculously loud at this time of night anyway? We need to just have it loud enough that everyone can hear comfortably over any, children's crying or so. We need to have it appropriate level. We don't sound check our speakers.
Mm.
Like that'd be really nice if we could do that, right? Simple, small things. Sound check the speakers. Maybe teach folks the adab etiquettes of Jama prayers. Let's try that,
Or
small
just
things.
even, sorry, Sophie, I was going to say, or even just the etiquette of how we speak to one another. Like for me, I mean, I've gone to the masjid, and it's not necessarily the speaker system that kicks things off. It's there's always that one auntie, isn't there, who's going around screaming at everyone, you know, um, because she somehow owns the masjid. There's always one. So even I think just a little bit of etiquette, it would be useful, I think, if masajid in the run up, or it doesn't all have to be on the mosque, if we all just do our due diligence and talk about or learn about just the etiquette of being in the masjid. It's not a place that any of us should be screaming and shouting in. Um, and so yeah, I think the etiquette with one another, like, um could just be improved.
Yeah, respect for the mosque and respect for the people in the mosque as well. Yeah, definitely. They're the two main sensory things that are really come out. Then there's obviously the space. So obviously when we're doing our prayers in congregation, right, it's shoulder to shoulder, feet to feet, we're touching each other. Now,
Mm,
for me personally, that's fine, but I know for a fact that a lot of autistic people struggle with the whole touch thing.
mm,
That could be a difficulty bit, is that you're so crowded, and a lot of us will have social anxiety, which is probably why we don't step out the house, is the
mm,
social anxiety aspect of it as well. So maybe we want to go on quiet days. So not the weekends and not the Friday nights and the weekend. Maybe days is actually quieter for Tarawih. Or
mm,
maybe it's okay to not go to Tarawih for that reason. Maybe that's enough just to, pray at home and be accepted and not get called out for it. Oh, how come you don't come up to the mosque?
mm,
Not get called out for not attending the mosque is another thing. Is like it's supposed to be a safe place, but if a lot of autistic people and particularly men I have heard them say, and my own oldest son as well, Juma prayers are a place of social anxiety as well because they're really overcrowded. Um,
mm, mm,
or just too many people there, and that whole being in a space of lots of other humans is actually terrifying.
mm,
So they struggle. So it's something that our mosques need to think about when it comes to even outside of Ramadan for Jummah as well.
mm,
How do we make our spaces more accommodating?
mm, mhm.
There was something else in my head, but now I forgot.
I was going to
We'll
ask
come
you
back
about,
to it.
I remember, so I went to a masjid recently. I won't name it because I don't want to put any particular masjid on blast or anything like that. But um, I went and I noticed that now this was only in the women's section. Okay. So on the women's section, they had a silent room. So literally, it was like, and it was for women to go into with their children. And when I saw that, my first reaction was, that's horrific, because it felt like it was sequestering the women with children to a corner of the masjid from where they can make all the noise that they need but not be heard. And the masjid is supposed to be a place of community. And what message is that giving to women and young children that you can be in the masjid, but we don't want to see or hear you?
Hmm.
And that troubled me. And also, I thought, but what about the single fathers who want to bring their children to the masjid? Where's their quiet room? There wasn't one. There wasn't a space like that for them. Um, because we hear about it all the time that, like, fathers also want to be able to bring their children to the masjid. Um, and yet it's as if that, and men do. So why are our masjids not reflecting the ways in which our families operate? But hearing you speak makes me think, well, perhaps there is a space for quieter rooms. which people can tap in and out of, and that should really be open to everybody who comes to the masjid. And it should be for the individual who wants the silence for themselves rather than shoving somebody into a room because you don't want to hear them,
It's
right?
inconvenient,
Like,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. So, yeah, I wonder what your thoughts are on that.
That'd be
Have you
really
seen
good.
that anywhere? Yeah.
They're not very common having those quiet rooms, but they would be amazing. Like if there was, I'm very sure all the autistic people would be doing their salat in there, I tell you that. And they'd be really enjoying it as well.
Yeah,
That would
yeah.
be really, really nice having it on both sides.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And for something that's about inclusion
And
rather
then
than,
how are we supposed to teach our children the etiquettes and the adab of the masjid if we're going to keep them to one side? You know, children are supposed to be seen, not heard type of nonsense.
yeah.
That's not very fair. What I
Mm.
would advocate for, and this is when I go to the mosque, right? I have my handbag, right? And it's full of little gadgets. So I know how to maintain kids' attention, right? I'll give them one after the other. So they know Sophie's coming to the mosque, right? And I'll have things, and all the kids, they're busy, they're occupied, they're not noisy, they're not disturbing others. And
Yeah.
the moms can come and pray. But having things like making this normal, having things that will keep the kids occupied in a positive way where they know this is my space. I'm welcome here. Why
Mm.
can't we do things differently like that?
Yeah, yeah. And I think that so there's a different masjid entirely. It's a small one just set up. And I went there for a talk one evening. And I've been there a few times and it's absolutely lovely because there's a family that comes with their autistic son. And I've seen him there from probably about the age of I don't know, 5, and now he's probably about 7. And it's just lovely because he has the run of the whole space, you know, and he gets to just run around, and nobody stops him. And everybody, the whole community that regularly comes to that masjid has become accustomed and educated on this little autistic boy's needs. And nobody flinched. I was looking around to see, is anybody going to? Nobody flinched.
Wow.
Nobody reacted. So it's completely possible for us to, elevate our way of being with one another and accommodate and not just accommodate, as I said earlier, really be welcoming of one another and make space for each other. We were all listening to the Imam, no problem. And this little boy and his parents were able to just be comfortable and relaxed in the masjid, not worrying about somebody's going to tell him off in a second or, you know,
We have this kind of ableism in our community,
mm,
shut up and sit still, right?
yeah, or
The
don't
fidgeting,
come.
or don't come, right? No, you
Yeah.
can't fidget. Like obviously I'm the master of fidgeter, right? And I've always lived my whole life being told stop fidgeting, stop moving around. And it's that need, wait, it's the ADHD, right? 'Cause I'm not just autistic, I've also with the ADHD and all that. We have that kind of sensory, right? The carpet, the beautiful part of masjid is the carpet. So when I took my kiddies to Istanbul a couple of years ago, when we were overstimulated by the Grand Bazaar. It was crazy. We just went in and straight back out. The heat, the noise, the lights, everything was so overwhelming. We managed to escape out of it. I mean, it was an amazing experience. We got a few things, but we were very overstimulated, the three of us, right? My younger one, at this point, we knew he's autistic ADHD, but no diagnosis or nothing formal, but we knew between ourselves. So wee man is just rolling around the carpets. Like that's him regulating himself. He's rolling
Mm,
around everywhere. And it was a quiet place. At
mm,
that point, there wasn't that many people there. And his sibling was like, "That's so embarrassing. That's so embarrassing." I was like, "No, let him be. It's the
mm,
carpet feel and it's that spinning motion that he needed." And that's very, very common. I mean, I did quite a lot of that when I was younger, as I used to spin like a wee helicopter, right? This is how he reminded me of that when he started doing this when he was a wee bit older. I'm like, "Oh, that was me." And again, autistic kids come from somewhere, so it's genetic. So
where there's one, there's many, okay?
that's what our community doesn't understand that. If you've got
Yeah.
autistic kids, they may came from somewhere, right? So we need to kind of learn to normalize having autistic adults amongst us as well, right?
Mm,
We're everywhere. But it's that the carpet of the mustard, again, but sensory, right? The feel of it, it's the beautifulest thing ever. I think that we're so blessed that we have carpeted spaces and that whole, rolling around the carpet because that actually helps. And then having no one to just complain and give them that freedom to just regulate. And again, if it's a young person rolling around, that's something that I would myself do, to be honest. But what I would like to do is just touch the carpet and just feel it if my socks off, and just that sensory stimulation is really good to ground you. I mean, it's good to ground anybody, to be very honest. Like again, thinking of people who have anxiety. But yeah, that not being told off for your normal stimming behaviors. If you're not
Mm,
disturbing anyone, you're not, you know, there's no reason to be, shut up and sit still kind of attitude. We need to lose it.
mm. Yeah, yeah. So from mosque spaces, we're talking about um, sort of dimmer lights, quieter speaker systems, better etiquette with one another, leniency with each other if some Muslims are not touching one another in the rows, um, better sort of education, generally speaking, around autism, and you mentioned ADHD as well. Um, and I think probably things like signage might be helpful as well.
Yes,
Yeah.
hugely, hugely. Signage is really, really important. So some mosques are bigger than others, and for some, it's easy to navigate into the women's section, the wudu section, the male section, this quiet room section. But the bigger the mosque is, the more responsibility they have for correct signage, which is easier for people to find where they're going.
Mm.
Yeah, that's really, really important.
Mm. And quiet spaces, that was the other one that we were talking about. Yeah. And I think actually signage for I mean I wonder if it would be useful. You see when you go into mosques, often they're like um no smoking, no talking on mobile phones, keep mobile phones silent. Um Something that gives the message of control your children, in various language. But I wonder if it would be useful as well if we could have reminders at the masajid that Muslims come in all different shapes and forms. And, somebody may have, I don't be believe necessarily that, we need to look at autism as a disability, but, um, that we should remind one another that there are invisible disabilities, or somebody might come in with huge amounts of anxiety. You just don't know, right? So can we all just be a little bit more, just be gentle with one another? What often happens in religious spaces, and especially from what I've seen in Muslim spaces sometimes, is there's that need to police, because
Mm.
we want everybody to be uniformly practicing Islam in the way that we think it ought to be. We need to chill out on that, like less policing and more allowing everybody to, just be as you are. And I always think about the incident with the Prophet ﷺ of a man coming in urinating in the masjid whilst drunk. And there are Sahaba there who want to go and beat this guy because, like, how dare he just
Yeah.
urinate in the mosque? And this guy was known for making the Prophet ﷺ laugh. And the Prophet says, just leave him alone and just pour water over where he urinated, for he loves Allah and the Rasul ﷺ loves him. And that just always gets me because I just think we just don't think like this with one another. That, like, even, and I'm not saying, that, you know that you might come to that extreme of somebody coming and urinating in the masjid. Maybe they will, who knows, right? But like the fact that we have that example is there as a reminder of the level of
Mm. Tolerance.
tolerance, forgiveness, understanding. We need to just look at that person and go, they're in the masjid. They're in the masjid, they're here to pray, they're trying to connect. That is evidence enough for me to assume that this person loves Allah and the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So my only responsibility right now is to ensure that they're comfortable being here too. And if that means just leaving them alone, then leave
Mm.
them alone. Um, whilst not being obviously exclusionary.
You know what I would like is if you had, like you said, with posters and signage and all that. I wonder if you had pictures of little fidgets to say, "You're most welcome to sit and fidget here quietly." Just you're most. That's like more of a calling it out to make people be seen. Like if
Yes.
you're the type of person who needs to come and you need to just fidget around, most welcome. You are welcome too. It's
Yeah.
like saying that all Muslims of all different races and ethnicities are welcome too. So then what do? We have our signs in different languages, right? That's
Mm.
one way to say like we see you, we welcome you. So let's do positives because when you were just listing all those signs that are typical at the mosques,
Mhm.
they're all very negative. I wonder if
Yeah.
we turn them around and say have positive signs and say, well, look after one another or give each other space or meet each other the way we are. Again, those examples of our Prophet to meet people where they're at. That's the
Mm.
example where yeah, which is why I loved when I was reading Hadith. Every time I basically, again, I think that's an autistic trait because we just copy from what we read and see, right?
Mhm.
Quite a lot and what influences us. I remember when I had finished reading the Bukhari back to back, I literally started thinking like the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Like, what would he do? What would he say? What's his reactions to today's my problems today? What's that type of ideology and that philosophy behind everything? And it was literally tolerance, meet people where they're at, talk to
Mm.
people where they understand, not where you're understanding, because there could be a discrepancy.
Mm.
Right.
Right.
So we need to get to our masjid to say, okay, we're all, again, it's that the internalized ableism that we have quite a lot, and then we need to really address that. People are not less than if they have a walking stick or if they have orange glasses or if they have fidget toys. They're not less than if they're wearing not, different clothes within obviously the respects of Islam, right? You can wear different clothes and have different ethnicities and different languages and everything. The diversity, that is what Allah Ta'ala tells us in the Quran, that we have been made with diversity. That includes
Mm.
neurodiversity, not just our skin colors and our cultures and our, communities. It's not
Mm.
just that. That diverse and diversity isn't just about race, though. It's also about how we are as humans in our brains.
Mm. Mm. And that verse that you're citing as well, it ends with, so Allah talks about creating us all in different forms and different communities and peoples. And it ends with, so that you can know one another, right? So the differences are there, not so that we can all be streamlined into a single way of, being a Muslim or a human, but so that actually we can learn from each other and get to know one another, be curious about each other rather than see differences as a reason to be scared or irritated or ignored, actually. Um, I wanted to ask you as well. So we've talked a lot about, Sophia, the like the mosque or the religious spaces and how they can be more welcoming and accommodating. But what about other spaces? I'm hoping that we'll also have non-Muslims who might be working in schools or workplaces that have autistic Muslims there. What are the ways in which they could maybe adapt or accommodate for Muslim, sorry, for autistic Muslims specifically in Ramadan?
My best advice would be for people who are working is try and get their annual leave during Ramadan in
Mm,
between times so they have days off. I
mm,
think that's if you're privileged enough to have that, then please do consider that your annual leave. And I have, and it's something I've picked up and learned from other people, is
mm,
actually a very clever idea, is to reduce your workload, change your schedules, flexible working. Again, these all come with the privilege to work flexibly. Not all of us have that privilege.
yeah.
If you do have that, please consider the flexibility, changing your routine up. Like I've been doing that as well in the past couple of years and realizing, the timing as a single parent, I need to get the iftar ready and all that. But then also thinking about my own self, what takes my energy, because I'm a private tutor, so going out to people's houses or doing work online, or do I, cancel, prioritize my students, exam
Mm,
classes, non-exam classes. So these are the things that I'm thinking about my priorities. What is expending my energy the most? And how can I accommodate that? If I've got family and friends in the past, I've literally, relied more on my mum to cook iftars for me. And I would say, I would pay into it. And as a family, where you're making for one family, can you make for two for my family as well? Because I literally, again, the executive dysfunction hits so badly, right?
mm,
So the ability to actually feed yourself sometimes goes down to no. I can remember there'd be Ramadans a few years ago where I literally had one roti and a kebab, and that was my iftar. And that's all I
mm.
had in 24 hours, kind of thing, right? No,
Wow.
24 hours, 22 hours. Because I had zero ability to feed myself, right?
Mm,
And at that point, my kids at that particular week, they weren't with me. So when I'm left to my own devices, yeah, it's terrible. So, but I think is my family have learned, they've learned to call me up, look after me. They know they need to step in, and that's what the whole support system. If you don't have family, then friends, who can look after you like that is somebody you can join up with.
Mm.
For your iftars, or for making the meals, or making two at a time for 3 days at a time. One of the things I was just thinking of doing before Friday was making and freezing kebabs, right? Shami kebabs for me, because I think they're quite big, they're heavy, they're quick and simple. They're something that I know I can get my kids to do. I've trained my kids up because I'm not just autistic during Ramadan, I'm kind of autistic all the time. I need that help all the time, not just in Ramadan,
Mm.
more so than yes. But I've trained up my kids to be able to, like, when I'm really burnt out and my mental health is pants right down, they can step up and look after me as well. So it's having that family around you, whether you're at uni or you're at work, is your support system, is making sure you tap into them. And I'm glad that, the mosques that do iftar, if it means, again, they're mostly for men, the iftars, but go to the iftars at the mosque. At least that's one lesson that you need to think about, is sort of food there for you. You don't have to go prepare it, especially for the single brothers. Yeah, that's my advice for them. At work, it could be during lunch times, having a quiet space to have a quick power nap. So
Mm.
I've heard of teachers who are fasting, non-autistic teachers who are fasting, who are in the staff room that's very, very quiet, not really used, abandoned staff rooms, and they're just lying on the seats and they're just having a nap. You know, you could do that because you're not going to be eating during lunchtime now.
Yeah.
Reduce your duties. Again, I'm a teacher, so my context is teaching, right? So like not doing bus duty, not doing, stairwell duty, that.
Mm.
Reducing what you can do, and then maybe, like swap over with a colleague and say, like, I'll do yours next month, but can you do this for me this month? So try and swap over with your colleagues if there's any excessive workloads, to barter with your colleagues, and share the workload with them.
Mm.
Other things could be, yeah, the quiet time is really important, I think. That is super important. If you're in an office space, being allowed to just sit in your car, sometimes, because for some places, the only place that's quiet and safe for you is your car.
Yeah.
Just sit there. And if you're not blessed enough to have a car, then we'll talk to your employer to say, do you have a quiet space for me? Because that's the hugest part there for us to regain our energy, even if we don't take a nap. The point is, we're not talking to people, we're not listening to people, we're that whole exposure to our sensories is dimmed down. It's called decompression time. We have decompression time, whether it's at university, college, or in the workplace, but factor that in, decompression time.
That's really helpful. So what about I mean I think we've covered a lot of tips, but I was going to ask you if there were tips that you had specifically just for autistic, Muslims themselves, maybe in terms of advocating for themselves or just in terms of prepping. I mean, I know that I don't know if she's here because I can't see who's watching, but I actually had a couple of sisters get in touch before today's event, and they're revert sisters, they're new to Islam. For some of them it's their first Ramadan. So do you have any advice, any tips for
Expectations on yourself, right? So it's all about expectation, right? You're expected to read one juz every single day. You're expected to have lavish meals, have your friends come along. You have all these expectations about what Ramadan really is, right? That's not what Islam is. That isn't it. I have to say the best way for me to be continuously reading Quran is my Quran group. So I have an online group from sisters from east to west all over the world. And we chime in and we read Quran, and we read one page each or 2 pages each, and we'll listen to each other, correct each other. And
yeah.
mashallah, a good couple of years ago, one year we managed to do 8 khatams in a month, in a year, 8 or 9.
Mm.
Because and it was routine. That's the thing. It was accountability, it's body doubling, and it's routine.
Mm.
And it establishing a new
Explain what
routine.
body doubling is, because not everybody's going to get that.
So body doubling is really important for us, especially the ADHDers out there as well, actually. So the best way for me to get things done is if I have somebody next to me. Not that I want them to do the work with me or for me. It's
Mm.
just having somebody there, another person present. And I think reading Quran is one way I've successfully managed to do it, because I've got other people around me doing it with me. That just
Mm.
reduces the demand of it. So a lot of
Mm.
autistic people, I am as well, are demand avoidant.
Mm,
Um, and so when you put more demands on us, then we're just going to go in the opposite direction. So the demand of reading one juice every single day, just thought of that. It will stop us from even opening up and reading one chapter because expectation is for us to read the whole thing. And it just overwhelms us. So biting it small bits at a time and being able to manage it small bits at a time and to say it is okay. A lot
mm,
of times in the past, I've only managed to read the first 10 Jews and that's it. And that was me. And I felt guilty about it. Like
mm.
I haven't done my whole, and when I was a teenager and I was younger, it was that culture thing, right? That you read one a day. And I had the energy then. I wasn't a burnt out old woman by that age. That's what I am now. I had the energy when I was younger, but not now. I really don't, 'cause I've got obviously much more responsibilities than I did as a teenager, right? It's being forgiving to yourself. And if you can have a body double, someone to sit with you, someone to help hold you accountable, someone to check in on you, that makes a difference. Body doubling for cooking. Cooking is so much quicker because you literally become time blind of how long it took to do something because you're too busy with the person rather than the task at hand. So I've
Mm,
realized in hindsight, I body doubled a lot with my younger sister growing up when we were at home and we got tasks to do, divvy up the chores or whatever. I used to use her for as a body double. So when I left the home after I got married, I never had that. I struggled. I
mm,
really struggled. So I did not have a body double.
mm,
And adjusting to that took me years and years and years. And that's a struggle a lot of autistic people will have is body doubling. So family members can come in and help with body doubling, or friends,
mm,
cooking, reading Quran, worship, listening to lectures as well as a good one. Like what your expectations of what you want to achieve need to be realistic. And
mm,
if it means that I'm just going to listen and contemplate on XYZ lectures, that is enough as well. It's the different ways, because the whole point of it is to connect to Allah. That's the whole point. So let's go back to the whole original point of Ramadan. It's internal like flush out of your body,
mm.
your soul, your whole system, right? Physically and spiritually. But that looks different to different people. And that back to that diversity thing is be kind to yourself. There is not set expectations by the auntie who's reading the Quran 2, 3 times in a month because she's got nothing else to do. She's a granny. She's got her children to do all the cooking and cleaning for her, so she's chill, right?
Mm.
A lot of us are working parents
Yeah,
or at university and juggling uni and work at the same time, and then juggling uni, work, family, and disabilities. So it's meeting yourself where you're at is
exactly.
probably the best thing that I could say.
Mhm. Yeah, that's great advice. I hope that that's helpful to those who listen to this afterwards, or who are listening now. So we had a few questions that were sent in um, prior to the to our event today. One of them I alluded to it earlier. Somebody had asked about, what do you do when totally overwhelmed or exhausted? And they talked about having chronic fatigue and physical pain and disabilities and autism and ADHD. And that then wudu is just too much. So for that, there is tayammum, there is the dry ablution, which is very easy, straightforward. You just say Bismillah, and then you put your hands on any natural material, so wood or stone or something like this. Um, you just place your hand on it and then on your arms and then on your face, and that's it. Okay. And one can do that for as long as you need to. Um, and then there was a question about the guilt of not being able to fast during Ramadan due to medical issues, and how to think about this. And again, I think that if Allah has given you a challenge, then Allah is also fully aware of it and fully aware of how you are struggling with that challenge. So I think there's two things. One is to know that you can ask Allah for help with that. Continue to ask Allah for help with these issues, medical or otherwise, but also to know that if Allah has given this challenge to you, then Allah is understanding of that. And to take it back to what I said earlier with regards to, the verse of the Quran where Allah has said, "La yukallifullahu nafsan illa wus'aha," that Allah does not burden a soul with more than what it can bear. And I remember my father having this conversation with me, when he first got diagnosed with diabetes, and then as he progressed, and it went from, reduced fasting to no fasting. Um, and he always used to feel bad about it. And I used to sit and talk with my dad about this, and I'd say, when Allah has given you a rukhsa, Allah has given you clemency on something and said you don't have to fast, that's Allah's gift to you. Yeah, that's a gift. And imagine if you gave me a gift and I'm your daughter, and if I rejected your gift, like how hurt you'd feel. It would be so hurtful to you if I rejected one of your gifts. And I said, it's no different for you to then turn around and now complain and reject this gift of Allah's too, right? Allah has given you um, clemency on this and allowed you to not fast and allowed you this alternative, to feed somebody else, to feed the poor for each day of the month, then that is a blessing as well. You're still fulfilling your obligation.
And
This
someone
was
else is
the this
also
was the
benefiting.
obligation exactly. And now, okay, you can't do that. Allah's given you something else that you can do. And
Mm.
just because of the way that you fulfill that obligation doesn't look like anybody else's, don't see that as something less in you or something diminished in you. But why not see that as something special that, like, oh, all of you over there are doing what everybody else is doing, whereas me over here, only a select few of us get to do this. So I sometimes think it's about the reframing as well. It's okay to do things differently, and especially when this is a gift from Allah. This isn't a fatwa that's been given to you.
Yeah.
This is Allah directly having told us that, and if you're ill, you fall under the categories of those who are exempt from fasting or praying, because of course there are times when we're exempt, especially as women, then these are gifts, like take them from Allah.
So two things have come to mind here. The fact that hidden disabilities in itself and the taboo of having because we unfortunately start judging ourselves the way other people judge us instead of
Mm,
judging ourselves through Allah Ta'ala's eyes, looking at how Allah judges us and looks at us with the mercy, right? Of infinite mercy. Humans are not that merciful. We can't expect that from them because they're human, they're limited, and they're limited with their frame of mind. We need to start thinking about, well, how is Allah Ta'ala looking at me? Because Allah Ta'ala is the one who created me with those difficulties. So
right.
obviously he knows the struggles. So I'm not making it up, but that guilt is so real because I was having the same discussion a couple of weeks with my daughter there, and she said exactly what you were saying. It's like, well, yeah, sometimes the time blindness, executive dysfunction, the barrier of wudu, it affects me and do my salah straight away on time. It does affect me. And I feel really, really guilty about it. And I talk about that. And it's like, and she said to me, well, that brain that's causing that from happening is from Allah Ta'ala. Allah Ta'ala
Yeah.
created that brain, right? So when you're having these difficulties, Allah Ta'ala knows where they're coming from. It's literally came with the package kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is the co-occurring conditions that autistic people also have, like POTS, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue that you were saying. Like that adds on to the existing sensory transitions, the executive dysfunction, time blindness, like those difficulties that we already have, but having additional because of trauma, because we haven't been looked after all our life. This is like very specific for females and older women post 30 who are now a whole generation of women are now getting diagnosed or being discovered as
Mm,
autistic now only because of social media and people are talking about it as opposed to 10, 20 years ago. So now we've lived our lives now. We've been traumatized enough that our nervous system has just basically given up on us because of that. So it's not because we're autistic that we have these problems. It's because we
right.
were not looked after correctly from the beginning. And that's why the trauma that's caused our bodies has caused those difficulties, unfortunately. And that's a very common story, particularly in women.
Mm,
It's knowing that you can leave a fast because of that. and you make up for it on your better days, or like you just said, video, right? You can pay for it. But normalizing that. But we come from a culture where,
As being exempt, yeah.
well, if we're having this kind of like backlash and like because of that, we've got no mercy from humans. Like why were we expecting humans? Why don't look at yourself from that framework of another human being? Who are we making ourselves equal to? The able-bodied person? No, let's look at us the way Allah has created us and how we are in our life at this point. A frustration that new Muslims will have is the fact that they might not have access to Arabic. That would be a big frustration. And is knowing that, okay, that will come, but right now where you're at right now is that you understand it in your native language, and
Yeah.
that is okay to Allah Ta'ala. That's fine. It doesn't have to be that particular, like you said, that set standard.
Mm.
It's it's like mainstreaming, right? It's a mainstream, but not everyone. It's not for everybody.
Mm.
There was another thing that you had said there, and it might come back to me, but it was something really important that I wanted to say before we finished. You want to give me a moment. It's ADHD brain, right? So.
Okay. I was actually going to ask you, Sophia, to share maybe some, you know, I know that you've got support groups that you run, so I don't know if there's any that you want to share if people are watching and they don't know about them. Is there anything they can plug into, especially maybe during Ramadan?
I know I'm writing content right now, around Autistic Ramadan. So that's getting right out and and hopefully I manage to do like one post a day, maybe some videos. I can't promise the videos, but so just letting people feel seen. And sometimes what I found is when how I've managed to get my family to understand me is to post things that other people share. As we say in, you are the expert on yourself, but then our family don't really, don't really measure us up like that, right? What's the thing in a Pakistani thing, right? What is it?
घर की
घर की
मुर्गी
मुर्गी
दाल.
दाल
I
बराबर.
say it all the time.
I
I
say it
say it
all the
all the
time
time,
too.
but
I
never
get
to
told.
myself.
So if someone else says it, then it's legit. But if I say it, what you on about, right? So I
Yeah.
think it's important that we have a kind of source where we can have people looking like us who are praying and fasting like us to say, you know what, let's call it out. It's okay if you didn't fast 30 days. If you had to take a break in between to just sleep it or just eat the nourishment you needed the food, it's okay to take that day off. And that's something that I've had to my mom, my sister, they've helped me accept it because of medications or because of just burnout, because of life. I've had to take a day off or 2 days off because of, I remember now what I was going to
You would
say.
say, yeah.
Yeah, but taking a day off because of that, it's fine. You can't be judged by that, and it's no one's business, first of all, right? And I'm saying this for women, yeah, we already get judged. And it's like, dude, Allah knows why we're off, right? We've got our monthlies or so, right? That's fine. But then if you're taking extra days off, it's that cultural stigma of taking days off, right? We need to, and our masjids need to normalize this, that people are not fasting for whatever reason. It's
Mm,
no one's business to ask why they're not fasting, male or female, older or younger, pregnant, not pregnant, right? It doesn't make a difference. That's on that person. It's a very personal worship, right? It's as much as it is community, it is very community wise. It's still very personal at the same time. So that's no one's business. Maybe that's one of the posters we should have put in the masjid is none of your business why that person's not fasting, mate, right? Maybe these kind of public messages that need to come out.
yeah.
So the last thing that I want to talk about was transitions. The transitions as well
Yeah.
into Ramadan takes a good 1 week, right? Out of Ramadan takes a good week and a half, right? That's
Uh,
the struggle is real, right?
right.
And then on top of that, if you're a woman and you're menstruating, and then again, rest of the year, that's a problem. It's like when you're into a routine, again, autistic people rely so much more on routine. It just helps us regulate ourselves. And
Mm.
then that gets disrupted as well. And then actually neurodivergent people are more likely to have PMDD as well. So then when we get it quite extreme. So we need to look at
Explain PMDD.
PMDD. Oh, I forgot what the actual term stands for, but it's basically very extreme premenstrual not even stress, man. It's a proper disorder. Um, and it's premenstrual and it goes on where your bleeding is extremely heavy. So then it
Uh,
has a huge difference. The again being ADHD as well. A lot of autistic people are also ADHD. In fact, she's a good point to put in here. More autistic people will have ADHD than they will have learning disabilities. So
Mm,
like less than 20% of autistic people will have learning disabilities, but around, as far as 80%, research says that will be autistic and ADHD. And then that's like, why I'm saying this when I'm talking about PMDD is because the interaction with hormones and ADHD is crazy. When your estrogen level goes down, you're going
mm,
your the ADHD symptoms and the hormone fluctuation, it just goes mad.
mm,
So that happens every like month or anyway. Then you've got that again back into the lack of your sleep schedule, the communal part, the expectations, the Quran, the everything, lack of food and drink, that's been routine. Put all that in the mix, right? It's pretty hard.
mm.
When yeah, the I can remember transitioning out of Ramadan to, it does take a good week and a half. Oh, hold on a minute, my battery's running low. Hold on. I never realized that wasn't even on. Battery, 1 second.
It's all good. I
Okay.
was wondering actually, because I think you can hear me. I was wondering about how can we how I mean I'm saying we how does one support, autistic folk into that transition and then out of that transition? Like how do we facilitate those transitions?
Reduce demands.
Okay.
That's it. Reduce demands. So the expectations should be like non-existent, right? The ironing doesn't need to get done, right?
Mm.
That's fine. What cannot doesn't need to get done or can be done by somebody else, let them be done by somebody else.
Okay.
It's like that. It's just reduce your transitions, reduce going out, meeting people, sensory, making sure you have decompression time.
Mm.
That's a huge one. At home or outdoors, you don't have to go out to malls. What you can do on a normal day, you're able to tolerate, you will not be able to tolerate during that fluctuation of transitions. You just can't do it. Don't expect that. So
Mm.
that's a huge thing, is take off demands from that person. And that's huge for being a woman. And then let's say Eastern women in particular, then the demands on us are stupidly unbelievable. And it's us to say that no, the family needs to step in and reduce those demands.
Mm. Which I think should be right anyway. Like as you said earlier in the conversation that the demands that one makes to accommodate and make space for autistic Muslims are actually demands that would benefit everyone. And just how Ramadan goes about across Muslim families in terms of the domestic expectations, or the distribution of those expectations is really unfair. It falls largely on, the matriarch of the family
Mm.
and then any other females that might be floating about in the house, and it's just sort of like
You don't
very
need to have
unfair.
samosas and pakoras every single day. It's not good for your health. To be honest, if you're going to keep things simple, you're going to keep it healthy as well for
Yeah,
everybody.
yeah, that's
And
right.
it's extravagance, right? Why? Let's go back to what Ramadan was supposed to be about, right? Get rid of extravagance. Then that means you're intrinsically reducing the demands anyway.
Yeah, yeah. Brilliant advice. Brilliant advice. I'm conscious, Sophia, of the fact that we have hit the hour, well, just over an hour. So I can't tell if there are questions. I don't know if you can tell.
I can't. Just one sister, it just feels really like overwhelmed. She goes, I'm crying because I feel seen.
Oh,
You know what? She's not the only one.
yeah.
People, I hope people can, continue this conversation and not, it doesn't always have to be one person talking about it. I hope I can encourage other people to have these conversations. That's the whole point of me being public about it, is that it's not on me. I die tomorrow. Who's going to talk about Autistic Ramadan then? Please
Mm,
take it forward. Please talk about it in your spaces around the world. It needs to be talked about. We can't put our autistic people in little cupboards and mustn't, anymore. That's I mean, or keep them at home. We're part of the community, right? Who's going to be the one playing with the kids and the fidget toys, right? And when you were saying like, you're going to be missing these people, you will be missing these people
yeah.
because we are intrinsic part of the community, the ones who have that long-term memory to do hifz, right? How'd that happen, right? You need to think about our strengths, what you were saying at the beginning.
Yes.
That routine, Islam is all about routine, isn't it? It's
Mm,
just that in Ramadan it's slightly different, but adjusting to it, we can adjust to it and we can work with it. It's just it looks differently, and we need people around us just to give us allowances. And
mm,
and once we've done that, it's beautiful having neurodivergent people around us because that's the diversity is what art are intended for.
mm. Beautiful. That's a lovely note to end on. Thank you so much, Sophia, and thank you to everybody who bared with us and made it through despite our technical challenges. And inshallah, this talk will be available afterwards as well on the SEMA YouTube channel. So thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, Sophia. You take care now.
Bye.
Assalamu alaikum. Bye.